Hi everybody, this is Maureen Wong, and today I have a post up over at the Your Next Stamp blog, which is yournextstamp.blogspot.com, and I am doing part 4 in our continuing series of getting the most from your dies. Today I'm going to show you a very simple technique and a couple different ways to execute it, and basically all it is layering dies to get more interest out of them. Let me get started. The first one I'm going to do, I used the Your Next Stamp Fancy Vine die set. Specifically, I cut the straight border die. There's a border die and a corner die. I used the border die, here it is, and I cut it out of a dark green cardstock and a light green cardstock. And the first technique I'm going to show today is layering them for a shadow effect. And so basically what you do is take your favorite glue that you like to work with on this kind of delicate die cuts. My preferred adhesive is the Zig two-way glue. I have this giant chisel tip, which you don't have to use one as big as this. The reason why I have this is to re-sticky my cutting mats for my electronic die cutting machine, but I found it also works really well for delicate die cuts. I actually prefer this most times for the really intricate stuff to the two-way glue pen, which actually works really well, but I find that this chisel tip one is actually easier to use, and they have a smaller chisel tip if you're interested in that, but let me show you the difference. With this chisel tip, you would just turn your die cut over, and basically I just dab it all over the back of my die cut, and I'm not really caring too much to do it nicely. If there's any extra glue, it'll go onto my mat and I can just wipe that right off. I'm on a Ranger Craft mat here, and oh sorry, I think I was out of frame there. And so you just tap, 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 tap. If you find the glue's not coming out, you can actually press in the tip and it'll get the glue flowing out a little bit more. But you basically just tap, tap, tap until the entire back of the top die cut, which is the lighter green die cut, is covered with glue. If you're using the two-way pen, however, you have to be a little bit more careful to actually get it in the spots that you want to get it on. So usually I wouldn't go over the whole entire die cut. I would pick the intersections or places that stick out, like this tendril, things that you want to get stuck down for sure, and bigger places it's easier to apply the glue. But that's why I like the chisel tip, because you don't have to be careful. You can just kind of dab, dab, dab everywhere you want, and the glue gets on there pretty easily. So now what we do is we just take the lighter die cut and place it on the darker die cut. And now what I'm going to do is not stack them up exactly together. What I'm going for is having the darker die cut kind of cast a shadow effect for the lighter die cut. So what I'm going to do is move them around a little bit so they're not actually lined up perfectly. And that'll get a shadow effect. Now you could do this with pens. If you get markers, you can make a shadow effect for your die cuts, but some people wouldn't know where to put the shadowing. With an intricate die cut like this, you'd actually have to be doing a lot of shadowing. So this is actually a really easy way to get that shadowed effect without having to actually draw in your own shadow. And when you're happy with it, you can just put this on your card, and let me zoom in a little bit more, and you can see how that actually has a darker shadow. Now, if you're not happy with it, this glue actually takes a while to dry. You have a bit of playtime, so you can keep moving the die cuts around until you get them placed just how you like them. And let me show you, I actually made a card a while back using this technique with the same fancy vine die. I actually cut that border piece in two right in the middle, and I put half of it on top and half of it on the bottom. And this is the Happy Day sentiments that I embossed in white, and then I just sponged over it with some distress inks. Then I added some big, I think these are 8mm sequins, and some sparkly gumdrops in the centers for flowers. Okay. With my next technique, if you're taking a die cut and you're putting a pattern on a pattern, or sometimes just certain colors on other colors, they can sort of tend to blend in if you just put them down like that flat. So a lot of times what you want to do is raise it up to give it some dimension so that it stands out from the background piece. But with a die cut like this, it's kind of hard to get little bits of foam tape all on the back of a die cut like this. So the easiest way to raise this up and give it dimension is to layer a number of die cuts. What I've done is I've just gone ahead and cut the same die cut. This is actually from the Your Next Stamp Must Have Borders set 1. It's a set of 4, and I just used this loopy, I'm not sure what this is called, loopy border die. I went ahead and cut it 4 times from white cardstock. This is just plain old Georgia Pacific cardstock from Walmart. It doesn't have to be any particular color. In fact, white is probably better. It doesn't draw attention to itself as much as if you used more patterns or colors or stuff like that, because what you're trying to do is not draw attention to the fact that you have multiple die cuts. You're just trying to make it look like this border is raised off of the background piece a little bit. So it's the same technique of applying the glue, and I'm going to use my giant chisel tip glue pen here, and again I just tap 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 all on the entire back. But this time, instead of offsetting the die cuts, we're actually going to make sure they line up exactly on top of another so that you can't see that they are separate die cuts. And like I said, this glue has a bit of playing time, so I don't have to line it up exactly right to begin with. I just get it kind of close, and then I can slide the die cuts into place so that they're perfectly aligned. And then press that down and make sure it's really stuck down there. Now I'm going to go ahead and do that for all the die cuts, finishing with the pattern paper die cut on top, and then you can see the difference. Okay, I've adhered the 4 white die cuts together, and then you can barely tell that that's not like a white chipboard piece. That's actually 4 layered die cuts. I've got glue on the back of my pattern paper die cut, and you can see the difference. That is so thin and doesn't stand out very well against this pattern paper. But once I adhere it to the stack of die cuts, even though you don't have a shadow effect, you get dimension, and the die cut is actually raised up so that you can see now that it has substantial thickness, and it tends to stand out on that pattern paper a lot more than it did when it was just a single pattern paper die cut. And that is the second technique. Now moving on to our third technique. In the second technique, I told you that you'd probably just want to use white cardstock for your layers, that you didn't want to draw attention to the color of the layers. But for technique number 3, I'm actually wanting to draw attention to the color of the layers. That's part of the fun of this. When you look at it straight on, it just looks like a regular die cut, but when you look at it from the side, it's got a lot more interest. So I'm using the Your Next Stamp Whatnot die set season set 1. Specifically, I'm using this sun image, the sun rays, and the circle center. And I've gone ahead and die cut this 3 times from a light yellow cardstock, 3 times from a darker yellow cardstock, And then I've cut the centers out of a light orange and a dark orange, also 3 times each. For this technique, you want to do, normally when you're doing just several colors, you'd want to do at least 2 or 3 layers. I find 3 layers shows up really well of each color, but I'll show you another example where you can just go with 1 layer and that'll work just fine. So this is the same as technique 2. You're just going to glue on the back of the die cuts and adhere them together. And with this, you actually have a choice of how you want to stack up the die cuts, because you can do it with your choice of either putting the lighter version on top or on the bottom. So what I would do is play with those and look at how they look with the lighter on top or with the darker on top, and then figure out how you want to adhere those together. And I'll be back in just a minute to show you the finished result. Okay, I've got the 3s of each color all glued together, and after a little bit of playing, I decided the effect that I want to go for is having the lighter version on top of the darker version. So it's almost as if the darker version is giving a shadow effect, but it's not the same as the first technique where you have the offset shadow. And I'll show you what I mean. And so I'm just going to put the lighter version of the center on top of the darker version again. And then adhere it to the sun rays. And with this piece, you can actually use different types of glues because the pieces are a little bit larger and easier to handle. So you don't necessarily need to use the two-way glue pen, but I just have it out, so I'm using it anyway because it's easy. But let me show you the effect that you get when you layer up the colors. Turn it sideways and you can see the different colors. And that's the effect that I'm going for, is to draw attention to it. When you look at it straight on, it's just a light orange on a light yellow, but when you turn it to the side, then you can see the darker yellow and the darker orange, and I think it's kind of a neat effect. And you can also do that, and sorry, I was going to say that this has 3 layers, so you can see how well that shows up with 3 layers of each color. But if you want to, you can just use 1 layer of each color, and I'm going to show you a sample here of doing a rainbow. This is the smaller doily from the Heart Doily set. There you can see it. And what I did was I just cut out a rainbow of colors of different cardstocks, and then I went ahead and cut the top one out of white. And when you go ahead and stack them all together, even though there's only 1 of each color, when you turn that to the side, you can see that you actually do get that rainbow effect with just the 1 layer of each color. And you probably wouldn't want to do more than 1 layer of each color because this stack is pretty thick already. I think I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 layers here. So that's a pretty thick embellishment right there. So you'd probably not want to do more than 1 layer of each color. I'm going to make this into a finished card and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back, and here is the finished card. This sketch is from the Sweet Sunday Sketch Challenge, and what I did was just took a couple of panels of white cardstock. I embossed this top panel with the Stampin' Up! Dots embossing folder, and then I added a little piece of ribbon. To the center of my focal point, I've added a button tied with gold twine, and the sentiment from Cup Topper stamp set says "Happy Birthday, Make a Wish," and I stamped that in gold Delicata ink. And this card is really neat because when you look at it from the front, it just looks like a very nice white on white card with a little bit of gold accent. But then when you turn it on the side, you can see that that is a rainbow. In that embellishment. So I think that's a really neat effect that you can't see it from the front, but when your recipient turns it to the side, they can see that there's a rainbow, and it's like a little surprise for them when they look at your card. And I really like that effect. So those are just a few of the ways you can stack die cuts for more interest. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and thank you very much for watching. Please check out the Your Next Stamp blog over at yournextstamp.blogspot.com.